Welcome to Discography, a 5 to 9 podcast where we go through an artist's catalogue one album at a time. Our first artist analyse for this podcast is Queens of the Stone Age, and we move on to their fourth album in our fifth episode, which also includes our introduction effort, and that fifth album is Lullabies to Paralyze. I'm Andrew Belt, 5 to 9 editor, and joining me for this series is Adam Reeve, editor of the Dead Good Music blog and a human being who's rather fond of the Queens of the Stone Age. I believe that's correct. Otherwise, probably wouldn't be doing this series otherwise. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know who they are. I would never listen to them.
wouldn't make for the most insightful listen if that were the case. But thankfully, we know that you're a big fan, and we're sort of getting sort of to the mid part of the Queens of the Stone Age discography. So we had a very rushed ending to our last episode due to our Zoom call reaching its limit. So yeah, there's an explanation if you wondered why it suddenly became quite rushed. I suppose as well, Song for the Deaf, you could have just that could be an hour-long episode in some ways, but hope we did it justice, and then we come on to the next one. Lullabies to Paralyze. So Ira Vulgaris, which we'll cover on a next episode. That is entry point number 1. Songs for the Deaf number 2. So Lullabies to Paralyze, I'd assume that would be your probably third full-length Queens of the Stone Age listening experience.
Yes, so I think for this one, I'd heard the singles from the album before, but hadn't really known fully like who they were from and all that stuff. Because this was, I think, in my head, I've been on a Need for Speed game on the PS2, I want to say, and Burn the Witch on TV and all that stuff, and same for Little Sister as well. So I was kind of, when I came to sort of fully listening to this album, like those singles in particular sort of felt familiar in some way. But yeah, it definitely sort of followed after Songs of the Deaf.
Yeah, which would be the natural way, sort of going chronologically as well. But I suppose, with Ira Vulgaris, you've kind of gone in
all over the place,
roundabout. So yeah, we've spoken about the kind of 2-year cycle they've had on their first 3, and then this is the first one where there's a slightly longer gap. It's three years after Song for the Deaf, where Lullabies joins us, and albeit early part of 2005, so March 22nd. But I think you probably have to say Songs for the Deaf, it's just such a big album that naturally, even if they had all the next songs ready and good to go, they would have toured that one over and over. And so I don't know, my uneducated guess about that difference in cycle is just because of the hugeness of Song for the Deaf. So where they go here, and personnel wise, Dave Grohl doesn't stick as a permanent member of the band. So we have Joey Castillo join us as the drummer for this album. Josh Homme continues. Then there's Mark Lanigan, who remains a part of the band in a few of these tracks. You have Troy Van Leuven, who's on guitar and plenty of other different instruments, including the bass, and Alan Johannes, who's the other guitarist and bassist. But you can't really talk about Lullabies without referring to the fact that Nick Oliveri is now not on the lineup, and someone who, with those that 2 album run of Rated R to Songs for the Deaf was such a big part of it. Particularly with his vocals as well. So, the backstory seems to be that he was asked to leave after getting round. His behaviour was just not tolerated anymore by Josh Homme, and yeah, he went in a different direction. So you have that kind of context here. Massive album they're coming off the back of, plus a big change to the lineup here. So that's the context. You've run through how this is the third album you listen to. Bafflingly, despite buying Songs for the Deaf, this isn't one I bought back in the day. So this is one I've had to revisit, and I've always wondered why that is the case, because the singles almost better than the ones which are on Songs for the Deaf as the singles on this album for me. But for some reason I just never did actually buy it. Maybe it was the weirder elements of Songs for the Deaf, which has quite a young person listening to that, maybe made me think maybe Queens of the Stone Age is a bit too mature for my ears. But yeah, with your more mature ears, listening to this for the first time, what do you make of Lullabies to Paralyze?
I feel like if I was to if I was mature enough back when it came out, I feel like it was always going to be tough to follow Songs of the Deaf. But I feel like Lullabies it goes in such a different direction that um, you can see why people might have been put off by it initially. Because I think the extra members to the band, like Alan and Natasha Snyder as well on keys, sort of brought with that like a totally different style of sound, and probably one that I've seen people say is a bit too Halloweeny,
Hmm.
bit too
Hmm.
spooky. Um, but I think as an album itself, I think it's a great album, and um, I think it definitely holds up with the rest. Like even despite sort of coming at a pretty tumultuous time for the band and for Josh as well. Um, like you say, like the singles are really good. Maybe they don't hit the highs of No One Knows and Go With the Flow, obviously, but I think as standalone singles they are really good. But even the deeper cuts, um, and they go hard as well, and there is still that level of experimentation and variation in it to sort of keep it refreshed and engaging throughout.
Hmm. I mean, you mentioned some of the personnel. I mean, I see Chris Goss provides backing vocals. I presume he's also on the production side of things again here. So there's, again, another element of, well, I suppose he's the only one who's been there from the off, really. But none of the musicians have been there since day one. Obviously, with day one being pretty much just Josh Homme. But that's interesting, actually. Some of as you say, the kind of how some people didn't felt. I don't know. Maybe it's cartoony a little bit. The kind of vibe on this album with the kind of Halloween kind of concept, because I think this one is slightly loose concept on, in terms of lullabies here, and a very
Mm.
um yeah, Halloweeny kind of composition and feel to it, which I don't think you would get from those singles as well, because they're just straight as you see it. Little Sister, fantastic rock track. In My Head is probably slightly more psyche, but again, could just be a general rock track. And yeah, Everybody Knows That You're Insane, just fantastic here. But they were the three I knew sort of at the time, and all of them were ones which I absolutely loved.
Mm.
Don't know if I was kind of doing the whole kind of ripping to CDs back then, or but I had it on. I think eventually an iPod and stuff. Those ones. So everything else on here is listening to it for the first time, retrospectively. And Josh Homme in his quotes about this album in the lead up to it, he said he didn't want to do songs for the Deaf too. It was a conscious decision. Forgetting also the
Mm.
tumultuous nature of what's happened in the band, but musically as well. He wanted to take it this different direction, and yeah, it's I suppose the main kind of current from songs for the Deaf to Lullabies is like having that slight kind of theme running throughout, and this theme is that Halloweeny kind of uh, eerie vibe, I suppose. But
Mm.
whilst they're quite different, quite different, I think this. I still think that there's only a small amount between the two albums, the predecessor and this one really, because I suppose what you maybe lose with Songs for the Deaf with Lullabies, you get something which is a bit tighter, um, and therefore less kind of room for filler. Although, as has been the case on the other albums we discussed, there are a few on here which I wouldn't miss too much if they weren't on here, and that'd be a Skin on Skin, and You've Got a Killer Scene. Their man just don't quite hit the heights, I feel. But then on the other end of the spectrum, for me, you got three 10 out of 10s, which are the three I've referred to as well, as singles. And I think just everything else on here just works quite nicely. There's a lot referring, it seems, to Oliveri quite directly. Probably everybody knows that You're Insane is a fairly overt
Yeah.
reference. You got Tangled Up and Played, which is about like a fraught. Well, actually, no, that's about a romantic relationship. To be fair, so that isn't. But that's a really great track and quite a nice play on Tangled Up in Blue by Bob Dylan there. Um, and yeah, Burn the Witch kind of refers to the persecution he felt about sacking Oliveri, and from the fans. By this point, they're that big that anything he does is commented on, so he's in that like celebrity zone, which when you read a lot of the lyrics in his music, that's not really who he is or wants to be. He's quite
No.
against the modern world and what people venerate, particularly through celebrity. So yeah, that's obviously got quite a lot of venom in that, and you got some extra smokiness to the vocals through Mr. Lanigan. Um, And then yeah, I think in some ways I'd say a bit of a similarity with Rated R in the sense that probably the first half of the album is where the levels are extremely high. And it does tail off a little bit in that second half of the album, I would say. There's some great tracks in there. The Blood is Love, Someone's in the Wolf, Broken Box, and Long Slow Goodbye. But whether any of those hold a candle to what we hear in that first half of the album, I think is
Mm.
is highly questionable. So, having said that, like I say, I would say this is on a par really with Songs for the Deaf, even if it doesn't feel quite as classic an album, maybe culturally, Songs for the Deaf clearly was and was that moment. But in difficult circumstances with this one, it's just again such a high level. So yeah, I don't know how would you sort of play Lullabies in your view, maybe on these first four albums,
Um,
where it'd sit.
yeah, I think as we said, like the standard here is just so high anyway. So their worst album is still better than a lot of people's best albums.
Mm,
I think for me, Lullabies, I'd probably sit just that tier below like Songs to the Deaf, so probably
mm.
more with Rated R,
Yeah.
where it's not really it's not an album I return to very often, but when I do, I do be like, this is actually like better than what I perceive it to be. Um, I don't know whether Although whether because of the darker themes and maybe because of like the absence of Nick and stuff, like it maybe took a little while longer to really get into the album and sort of learn to appreciate the likes of I Never Came and
Mm,
even even like The Blood Is Love, like where it is sort of drawn out and heavy but quite melancholic at the same time.
mm,
I think for me it took a while for things to properly sink in terms
yeah.
of appreciating like the themes and the lyrics here, whereas before it was sort of like balls to the wall riffs and drums and everything, whereas here it's a bit more considered.
A bit more mellow, maybe slightly more on that front.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
what about that kind of Halloweeny aspect of this? Did you like that, or was that off-putting to you?
Um, it wasn't off-putting. I think it was maybe a sense of I don't know, they're really leaning into it.
Mm,
Like multiple songs seemed
yeah.
centered around this kind of theme and stuff like that. And um, I think yeah, it sort of took a few listens to step into that world as well
Yeah.
and really get in the mood to enjoy it as well.
So slightly jarring maybe on that front. Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who quite likes a theme or whatever with an album, so I think it's quite good. But I can certainly see, like I say, it's yeah, maybe not as compelling and almost a little bit I don't know, broad brush, um, and not quite as refined as what uh people would like from them in some ways. So yeah, we spoke about quite a few of the songs on here. Um, Last time there was a few different tracks. You know, Rated R was one we went for exactly the same, which I didn't think would happen for any of these. So to talk about our best of list, we'll come to at the end of this whole process. Which ones from Lullabies are going through to your long list for consideration?
I think for me it would be Thank God I've Been Played, In My Head, Little Sister, and Someone's in the Wolf.
Okay, so we've gone for four there. For
Mm.
me, the three which will definitely be in there are Little Sister, In My Head. Also, Everybody Knows That You're Insane. And then for consideration for me, it would also be Burn the Witch and Tangled Up in Played. So yeah, one different in terms of one we've included each with Someone's in the Wolf for you, and for me, Everybody Knows That You're Insane. Um, so there we go. We'll see how big this list is going to be at the end and how much of a job it's going to be whistling that down. But yeah, so yeah, real interesting one, I think, in terms of how this sits within their discography. So really good to kind of, like I say, get that and also some of the discussions which were had at the time and about it and some of the ways it was put together. And again, probably one which I hold in higher esteem than you, but also whilst acknowledging that uh, that Queens do not make a bad album. So that was Lullabies to Paralyze. But keep your ears and eyes open for our next episode, which concerns Era Vulgaris. And don't forget to stay up to date with 5 to 9 by following us on Instagram and YouTube. And to keep up to date with the Dead Good Music blog, follow @deadgoodmusic_ on Instagram. Thanks for listening.